Okay, we're live. So we talked about Jupiter in Sagittarius. We talked about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. We haven't talked a lot about Neptune in Pisces, apart from the vlog I just did, of course. And Neptune went into Pisces around 2012. It'll be there until 2026. We are slap bang in the middle of it, really. Now, as I was saying in my last vlog, I know that a lot of astrologers out there would have been very excited about Neptune in Pisces because it kind of taps into the way they think about the world. And I can imagine they were talking about things like greater spiritual awareness, aligning with our inner energy, truth, esotericism, prophecy, getting in touch with our inner core and our compassion. And just to read you what this book thought about it, it would be a time of peace following the beginning of the Aquarian age. I don't see much peace around. I don't know. Maybe I haven't been watching the right news channels, but I'm not sensing a lot of peace out there. You guys? The period will provide an opportunity for the unfolding of spiritual faculties and the development of exalted forms of music and art. Now, quite frankly, I think music and art are totally in the doldrums. The inspiration seems to have totally gone out of that. I don't think we're producing art or music on a level comparable to any time since we were rubbing sticks together to make fire. It really isn't that great. And healing will make great strides. Well, I don't know. Big Pharma might be making great profits. I'm not sure healing is making great strides. The highest form of Aquarian culture will begin making use of the highest creative attainments of the past Piscean age, and many great mystics, artists, and spiritual leaders will be born. Well, I don't know. I suppose some people out there think Justin Trudeau and Emmanuel Macron are great spiritual leaders. I guess if you're one of those kind of woke Me Too people, maybe you do think that. I'm an electronic musician. I better fix up the world. Yes, please, musical Neptunian. We need some better music, right? Maybe it's just my age talking, but I don't see a huge amount of people talking about the fantastic music that's being pumped out. So Neptune has two sides. So as when I looked at the timeline of what was cooking every time Neptune was in Pisces, we see that there is generally a push towards the evolvement of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, communism, these big philosophies which have shaped our world, were really kicking off every time Neptune was in Pisces. So we can't just like diss the whole religious spiritual aspect of Neptune, but there's a huge other side of Neptune which speaks volumes about what is going on. So Neptune in Pisces is in its own sign, so it's magnified, right? So when we have Neptune in Pisces or Neptune in the 12th house, it represents the dissolution of boundaries and the dissolution of identity. And what does that tell us? Since 2012, what have we had? Open borders. Yes, an aesthetic was invented when Neptune was discovered, right? Excellent. Yes, that's right. And it's perfect because Neptune does rule pharmacy, anesthesia, the state you go into when you're under anesthetic, right? So anyway, the dissolution of boundaries, and we see this whole push towards open borders. Now, for anyone born before the millennium, you accepted borders. It was part of life. You knew if you wanted to go somewhere, you take your passport, that there might be border checks to see you not bringing in illegal stuff. It was a part of life. It was quite normal. Since Neptune has gone into Pisces, how quickly have they demonized borders? And yet, people only seem to be asking questions about borders if it's Trump's wall. I mean, a wall is kind of a benign thing. It's just a wall. It's not guns. It's not like he's putting nukes on the border. You would think he was actually lining up the tanks ready to shoot people the way people go on about that wall. And yet, do they say anything about the big wall Israel have built? I don't see a lot of people getting exercised about the fact that China has a strict, immigration policy. I think there are very few countries in the world, whether it be, Bolivia, Chile, New Zealand, Iran, that you can just waltz in there and no one cares. And yet when it comes to America, people are getting hit up about it. I saw on my Facebook timeline people putting up protests in South Africa saying, sign this petition against Trump's wall. It's got nothing to do with them. It's down to the American taxpayer who's going to have to fund all the legal expenses, the medical expenses, the fentanyl problem of the drugs calls that are pouring over the border. It's all down to the American taxpayer to pay for it. So it's really no one else's business. I seem to remember back at the beginning of 2017, Australia was boasting that it had been 1,000 days since a single boat person had entered Australia. They were very proud of it. Australia have extremely strict immigration policy. It's absolutely stopped all the boat people coming into the Northern Territory from, Vietnam and Laos and all those places. And does anyone complain about it? No. No one has a word to say about it. No one has a peep. It's thoroughly manipulated. The other thing that where I have an issue with this whole open borders and the dissolution of our national identity, which is key why they want open borders, is to bring many people in. Not only are they importing voters for the leftist parties, but they're trying to change cultural identity to water it down, and so people just go into this big globalist melting pot. Isn't that so? If they want to do that, why can't they put it in their manifesto and stand on a platform and say, we want that? And then it's totally honest. If people want it, they can vote for it, we can debate it. But they all pretend that it isn't happening and then introduce it via stealth. And that I feel is totally dishonest. Because to be honest, if we're going to have open borders, we need to totally change our tax structure, our everything. And we need to say to people, well, there is going to be a kind of a problem with housing. You won't be able to expect the same services in the health service and whatnot. You've got to be honest. There are going to be a lot of problems which they don't want to discuss those problems. So they like to pretend it's not happening when we all know it is happening. The whole thing is just totally dishonest, right? And so, yeah, and I think, as a taxpayer, there's a kind of tacit contract you have with the government that when you're paying tax, you're going to get certain benefits from policing, healthcare in some countries, a pension, maybe social services if you or your fellow citizens fall on hard times. But you don't believe when you're paying taxes that you're doing it for the benefit of anyone and everybody. And so we need a radical reform if that's the direction they want to take us in, and to be more honest. But there you go, Neptune. Dissolution of boundaries, dissolution of the national identity. What Neptune is also dissolving, identity, right? The identity between man and woman. And of course, we see this massive push towards gender dysphoria, all the gender issues, telling us that people can be gender fluid, you can choose your gender, telling children this, going into schools to kind of promote this whole thing. Now, on one hand, I do believe that because of all the plastics and various muck we are putting into our water, they're releasing some sort of chemical called BPA, which is actually causing gender dysphoria on a biological, on a scientific level. It is a proven thing. It's not that these people are kind of imagining things. It is a thing that's happening. However, many of the people that are pushing these trans issues don't seem to be talking about the chemical changes in our environment and the biological issues. It's almost like it doesn't suit them to connect the two. They want to deal with them separately and want to kind of deny that what is happening is linked to a potential problem. They want to see it as a matter only of identity and uniqueness, not as a byproduct of environmental pollution and change. And I think that's kind of bizarre that they wouldn't want to connect those, but I think it's because it's a greater, it's a whole greater picture of confusing people about who they are. I think I read recently the suicide rate amongst people who are transgender or trans is astronomical, as high as 50%. And that's probably because it's being sold as a solution. Like your whole world revolves around your gender and your identity. It's everything. It gives you meaning. If you can just get this gender thing right, your whole life's going to click and you're going to feel fine. I find the whole thing kind of skin deep. It's very, very superficial. A lot of us never talk about or even make a big deal about our gender identity, sexual issues and all that. We just don't feel the need to talk about it. It's not part of our life. We're far too busy thinking about, like the day-to-day problems you have to deal with, like earning a living, doing your housework, and also about your goals, your ambitions. Are you a good person? Are you contributing to society? Are you caring for other people? What sort of person are you? When it comes deep down to it, what is your character? Are you tough? Are you resilient? Do you care? Do you make the most use of your talents? I mean, surely that's important rather than just, a gender identity. But they've made such a big thing of it that people are kind of so focused on that they can't see the wood for the trees. And that's the whole of the Neptune thing. Of course, it kind of annoys me, all these things about lessons telling kids about gender. Fair enough, but the thing is, the biggest problem facing children is basically diabetes, because children are eating so badly. So the most important thing they could be learning in school is how to cook and what good diet is. That would be the best thing to help them lead a happy and fulfilled, healthy life. And that's what we should be teaching them. And also the dangers of using their phone too much, rather than all this other stuff, which I don't think is going to put them in any good place. And I think the parents go along for it. I mean, it would be very different if you said to parents like, okay, if your child's going on one of these kind of gender transformation experiences, it's going to cost you £1,000 a month. rather than the state paying for it, because it would make people take a step back and think, oh, well, if I'm paying £1,000 a month for something, I better think this through, which is probably not being done. The other thing that Neptune influences is drugs. So we're not just talking about them. We know our society is awash with illegal drugs. Yes, education is basically dead in schools. I don't believe people are really, kids are being failed by their teachers. I don't think they're learning things to get them ready for the world of work, definitely. Hi, Lobby Dossa, yeah. Soya in most bread. Yes, there is soya in everything these days. It's hiding in things, and yeah, it's not good for men. Mimics estrogen. Yes, exactly. And of course, gluten. I'm going to come on to talk about gluten in a second. So society's awash with drugs, the fentanyl, heroin, coke. I'm not, I'm keeping an open mind on the cannabis thing, because it does have medicinal use and all that. But what about the pharmacological drugs? I remember about 15 years ago, or even more, they were saying that Prozac was the biggest selling drug ever in the history. Imagine now, how many people are depressed or suffering from autism or other mental ailments or illnesses. People all on these SSRI drugs to try and manage moods and temperament. We have a society who's like, virtually, we just medicated up to the hilt. It's the biggest thing in dealing with everything. As I said, Neptune rules pharmacies, rules big pharma. It's all about drugs, and we just drugged out. It's shown to be the solution for everything. Again, get back to diet and what you're saying about the estrogen, and it's gluten. A lot of the foods we're eating, I'm going to put gluten top there as the culprit, also sugar and also yeast, which causes the candida yeast in the gut to go wild. It damages your gut, and so your gut becomes like a sieve, and it doesn't properly contain and eliminate dangerous toxins. So those toxins are absorbed into the bloodstream. They cause hormonal changes in the head, like they can influence your serotonin and your melatonin. They cause the reuptake of serotonin, and that's what causes a lot of mental illnesses. And people just totally denying the link between what you eat and mental illness. They say, oh, well, mental illness can be caused by a whole variety of things, which, we know it can, but it's totally linked to the gut, because our body is one big chemical reaction, and so is our mind. That's why these SSRIs, the serotonin reuptake inhibiting drugs, are trying to redress the balance caused by all the toxins that are going in our bloodstream. GMAF guy. Yes, GMAF guy. That's David Noakes. He used to be a big anti-EU guy. He was one of the guys that got me started about 15 years ago on learning what the EU was about. Yes, there were a lot of people that came over from France to his trial, and because there's some British people in France that have also been arrested and possibly facing prosecution because of the whole GMAF thing. And apparently the judge went on him as easy as he could have. He had to do him for something. So they did him for money laundering. Basically, he's not money laundering, right? But it falls under that in the law because he's selling a illegal product, right? Because in this country, under the 1930s Cancer Act, you can't say you've got a cure for cancer. So because he's selling a product that is curing cancer, he's guilty of money laundering. How perverse, right? Right is wrong, this upside down Neptunian world we're living in, Neptune, Pisces. So yeah, but apparently the judge gave him the minimal sentence he could have given him. So people were quite happy about that, but it's enough to wipe him out financially and stop what he's doing. But I do hope, I think I read once that they were doing the GMAP thing in Israel as well, so hopefully they're cracking on with it there. It's very hopeful. I have a friend who's a chiropractor who told me all about it. She put me onto it, but as I say, I totally trust Dave Noakes because his research is excellent. But he had quite a lot of support from the guys at UK Column, so that was good. Yeah, so right, so here we've got Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, and the drugs. Also, Neptune in Pisces is related to the autoimmune system, and of course, more and more people coming down with autoimmune diseases from that, escapes me, the thing Hawken had, and many others. Of course, I don't need to explain. Okay, celebrity, meaningless, vacuous celebrities and reality stars who we all fawning over. Now, this actually started when Neptune was in Aquarius, because Aquarius is the sign of fame, right? So we had the X Factor generation where everyone just wanted to be famous. What for? I don't know. Just make me famous, And that was, and now it's sort of gone to the next level with Neptune in Pisces. If it wasn't bad enough with all these reality fame hungry, meaningless idiot people, now we've got Neptune in Pisces where it's even more vacuous people are being foisted upon us as kind of role models, social influencers, basically a whole lot of nobodies, just making money out of pushing globalist crap most of the time. Neptune in Pisces, another problem is apathy. We know we live in a world of sheeple who are kind of sleepwalking into this concentration camp of the mind, and they just don't even see it happening. So yeah. Also, what we have with Neptune in Pisces is the inversion of good and bad. So we see people on progressive liberals on the left who have a self-righteous sort of complex that they are doing the right thing, and because they think they're doing the right thing, they think almost any means justify their ends. And it reminds me of something that was going on the Stanford University experiment, where they had a simulation of prisoners and guards, and it actually had to be ended after 6 days, the simulation, because people got too caught up in it. And what they found in the experiment is the people who were allocated the role of God started to abuse their power, and they started to both psychologically and even physically torture the prisoners. Some of the prisoners rebelled, but a lot of the prisoners took the sides of the God and helped suppress the other prisoners who wanted to rebel against it and who could see it was wrong. It became so extreme that the experiment was actually ended. And what they wanted to see during that experiment was the psychological effects of perceived power. So just because these people were given a role as guards in this experiment, they had a perceived power, they took it too far, it went to their heads, they felt they'd almost been given the authority to do things which prior to experiment they would have seen as unthinkable against these other people. Now this I totally liken to the far left and the way they are intimidating, doxing, harassing, verbally berating, slandering, doing lawfare against people just because they have a separate opinion, and they sort of feel that it's okay to do it because they're on the right side. They think because they're progressive and liberal that anything they do is acceptable, and it really isn't. And I think a lot of these people are very boring, mean-spirited, abrasive people who in another world wouldn't have many friends, wouldn't be popular, don't have much talent, and they'd be a nobody. But because they've been able to latch onto the social justice thing, it's given them a platform, it's given them a place where they can bully certain people and get out the bullying instinct in them, while also being getting credit for it and getting lots of followers out of it. It's really sick. That's also a lot about Neptune. Big thing, Neptune in Pisces, victims, right? Neptune is a perpetual victim. I've talked often about how in my other vlogs about communism and how they put it on you, whether it's communism or the Frankfurt School or cultural Marxism. There's all different words for pretty much the same thing. And they discovered after the fall of the Soviet Union that the working class were basically crap proletariats. They just wanted a better life. They didn't want to lead, because communism doesn't acknowledge the whole thing, that some people are leaders, some people are willing to be more pioneering, to take on risk and to take on responsibility. You get another group of people who don't really want that much responsibility. They just want to kind of do their job, go home, let the boss worry about the rest. And there's different sorts. There are two different people, and the people who take on the risk and that extra responsibility do need to be rewarded, and you can't change one into the other. Communism doesn't see it that way. So they decided they needed a new proletariat, and the new proletariat is the victim. That's why every single day now, you turn on the radio, you'll hear a program about an ism. The EU is living on borrowed time. Absolutely it is. It's disintegrating under the weight of its own illegitimacy, as Pat Condell once said. Okay, so you've got every day you're hearing about, oh, this feminism garbage. Because we're women, we have to feel somehow oppressed. It's racism, it's Islamophobia, it's homophobia, creating groups of people, stoking grievance, making people feel more oppressed when they actually aren't. And as a woman, I don't feel one bit oppressed. I think middle-class women growing up in any Western country, definitely the UK, Australia, South Africa, America, we've never been as privileged. We have every advantage. We can do whatever we want with our life. It's absolute bull dust trying to convince us that we are being held back. We simply aren't. In other cultures, maybe there are problems. There definitely are. I think we can say that. But for the Western one, absolute nonsense. Sherry Blair talking a lot of bull on Sky News. Women aren't becoming pilots. It's because women are oppressed. Rubbish. We've got 2 pilots in the family, an air hostess. The reason women aren't becoming pilots is because even when they become an air hostess, they are warned that their fertility is going to massively drop. because of all the flying, which is a big reason why women will not become pilots. You can become an air hostess for a few years and then give it up. But if you're going to go to all the trouble to qualify as a pilot, and then you're not going to give it up, you're going to have to keep doing it, which will make your fertility drop and make it very difficult to raise a family. So there are reasons for these things. It's nothing to do with whatever. I mean, that's just nonsense. And they go on about that all the time. It's all about identity politics and just creating a class of people who are going to vote according to identity issues, right? Because, and another thing is the left just believe everything is down to nurture, not nature. We don't have any fundamental traits. That's why they want to control everything, control schooling, control kids, because they think they can shape you because you don't have any natural inclinations. It's all down to your environment, and that's why they want to control the environment so damn much. Also, the big thing that communism was against, of course, was the Christianity and the church, because Christianity represents all sorts of freedoms and individuality that runs in stark contrast to the communitarianism and authoritarianism of communism. They've always identified it as a threat. There were three threats they were worried about: the family, because they know people will die for their kids. That's how powerful that parental instinct is, and they can't stand it, because if you're willing to die for something, that makes you kind of invincible. The other thing that they were worried about is people are patriotic. Never mind the ruling class, politicians in power. People have an instinct to care about their country, their culture, and they will, as we saw in World War II, be willing to die for that. Oh, communism hate it. And of course, people, if you have a belief in a god or another world, then it also makes you harder to control, because they just want you to believe in the here and now and in them. When you subscribe to a higher power, it gives you a kind of strength to endure, kind of hardship, victimization, discrimination in this life. So once again, Neptune in Pisces, Christianity is represented by Pisces. Neptune in Pisces, Christianity has never been under such a big threat. I do think that they're trying to sideline it. Gemma Doherty was talking a lot on her vlog the other day about how the communists infiltrated the Catholic Church to try and undermine it in any way that they can. So you can see it's part of the whole pattern. They want to just kick that away. And I talked about that as well in my blog on communism. So again, Christianity, and we must remember that Neptune in Pisces has a lot to say about Jesus. Jesus was a scapegoat, a victim. He was eventually crucified. And I think in the order of the day, he was the kind of rebel rouser, the renegade, except he did it in a very peaceful way. And we should always remember that this is the time of false accusers. I know it says that in the Bible. Even if you don't believe in the Bible, Neptune in Pisces says the same thing. We have never lived in such an era of purposeful confusion, lies, deceit, obfuscation, the fake news era. We live in a sea of deceit and confusion, and that is very much typified by Neptune and Pisces, which wants to blur everything up, create mass confusion, so that out of that, anything can happen. Just some comments to read up on there. Please do a video on the Indian election. Okay, I'll give you when will currency go into depression? Well, with Uranus has just gone into Taurus now, and it's going to stay in Taurus for 7 years. When I will Uranus. If you want to, Simon, I did a video. It's called Global Predictions, Part 1 and 2, 2019, 2020. I did it last year. I do talk a lot about Uranus in Taurus there, if you want to catch up on that one. So I will try and speak a little bit more about it. But if you want to go back to those, I talked about those things quite a lot. I would like to do a video on India. I've got one on Brazil pending, my Germany one. And I had quite a few requests for Nigeria and Jamaica as well, but I'll try and get to all of them. I did have a quick look at India, and I've just got to get more of with the kind of political climate that's going on there, and check to some of my Indian contacts, so that I'll come up with something nice and nice and accurate. I just thought I'd mention again something that I find strange. We're always talking about these victim classes, oppressed people. The one group who I never hear about are the disabled. Now, I remember during the Oscar Pistorius trial, they had a lot of witnesses talking about how disabled people are the most discriminated against, who suffer the most violence. And they really are the victims of victims. And they are so vulnerable. And yet, when do you ever hear programs talking about violence against the disabled? They seem to be one of the victim classes that are left out and that no one really cares about and has no active voice. We hear about these other people, their pathetic grievances day in, day out, don't we? I just think it's a pity that people who do have genuine grievances are not being being heard. So just to end up the words as well for Neptune in Pisces: terrorism, subversion, corruption, secret groups, secret society, secret control. So we are reaching an apex for all those things, and of course mass deception, mass delusion. So we not only have people being deceived, we have people being deluded. And talking about astrology, even the whole New Age movement is in part being infiltrated by people who want to mislead people. That's why you have so many people in astrology and other of the New Age movements talking utter garbage and misleading people as well, and also encouraging this whole nonsense like The Secret and was visualization, positivity. I mean, I think being positive and optimistic as a person, it's logical that you would be more successful. You don't need to have all these nonsense about affirmations to tell you that. It's just obvious that you should try and think positive about things. But I think that whole movement has also encouraged people to ignore the realities of life, and that is that there are obstacles and problems that need to be overcome, and there are difficulties. So anyway, that was me talking about what I think Neptune in Pisces really means, and how when you look at everything that Neptune represents and go through it and how it's influencing our world right now, it just fits in totally. So I've really enjoyed talking to you guys, and I hope it won't be that long before I do another one. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you for all the comments. That's great. And yes, I'll keep India in mind, start working on it in my head. And in the meantime, everyone, take care. Watch out. We'll see what happens with Theresa May tomorrow. I think her deal is not going to be... I'm pretty thinking it won't even be voted on tomorrow. I think she'll probably cancel the whole thing. Even if it's not voted on, she's going to bring it back before the end of March to try and get them to vote it through again. So we'll see what happens that time. I'm still thinking a no deal is very much a possibility, no matter what happens this week. Thanks, guys.